And Floyd and Beth all got in a car to go to Milan, where the two girls, Kathleen and Elizabeth, had taken teaching jobs, and Elizabeth was putting on her play, a play. It was her first moment, because she had just started teaching there the fall prior to that. And on the way, they were struck head-on by a drunk driver in another car, and nobody was killed instantly. George developed pneumonia because the steering wheel crushed his chest and died 4 days later. But his wife Millie was knocked unconscious and sent into a coma that lasted months. So her youngest son Howard had to be yanked out of Lincoln, Nebraska, University of Nebraska, but he was having kind of a rough time there anyway, so maybe it was for the best. And had to return home to...
It was a good time, not a rough time.
Well, good in some ways, maybe not so good in others. He was actually signed up to be a dentist, and I can't begin to imagine that ever going anywhere.
I can remember that so vividly. I was sitting under the steps when they came.
Granddaughter.
Oh, it was my father and mother when they came to pick them up to take them to Milan, and it's been so vivid in my mind. And
what do you remember most?
well, they're leaving.
They're leaving me.
Yeah, and I had to stay home. My sisters were going to take care of me.
And were they injured at all?
No, just Aunt Millie was real bad after that, but father and mother were fine.
So Howard and his Aunt Jean, who was born in 1865 and lived until 1936, went back to the original homestead farm where Azariel had homesteaded. I forgot to mention that when I married my wife Selena in 1863, just a few months before our marriage in November of 1863. By the way, that was a double marriage. It was a double wedding. My brother Legrand married Selena's stepsister from that marriage that I mentioned, or that remarriage. Emma Torrance was Selena's stepsister, and they had a double wedding. Emma and Legrand, Selena and myself. And so shortly before the wedding, I bought 200 acres of land from a gentleman named Mr. Ames, right across the road from my parents. So we were able to enjoy a reciprocal period of being able to be together and enjoy each other's company. And now, of course, that farm is owned and operated by Steve and Velda, another one of my great-grandchildren, his wife.
What year did you build your house?
House was built about the same time. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, let's see, we've got, Howard had to nurse Millie back to health, and he did, and he ended up going to Michigan State, finishing there in business, and the rest is history. Aunt Jean was his chief help, right? Absolutely. Aunt Jean was a saint.
That's why my middle name is Jean.
Yep.
And she's the one that got the bat in her hair on the porch at the homestead house. That was quite an exciting time.
So we have now Willard R. was my daughter-in-law's father. That's who he is, just so you know. And this is George Burr. Okay, Millie, and this is we'll leave that. Okay. My other son, my youngest son, Floyd, is nearby.
So you didn't know that Lena had adopted a son?
No, you lose track of things.
He's African American. And that's very interesting.
Why don't you, great-grandson Jan, why don't you tell us a little more about that?
I'm trying to think
Yes,
of his name.
his name was Cornelius Ford.
That's right, thank you.
Yeah.
Cornelius Ford. You remember that?
She taught
And he was raised by Lena and her brothers and cousins in the area.
So she went to Tennessee and
Yeah.
taught in a freedmen's school.
That's right, a freedman's school, and brought him back. He was an orphan. Okay, and was raised by the family, was sent to Michigan State. Late in life, I believe he was the chairman of the Buffalo, New York Stock Exchange, or Livestock Exchange. Okay? And he came to my parents' wedding. Okay? He and his wife, one of the stores. And I still have the wedding gifts he gave my parents, okay, in my house.
Thank you.
Oh, he was just wonderful person.
Hey, my youngest son was Floyd. You probably all heard a lot of you have heard of Floyd. Floyd's pretty well known. He had a huge family. He went to Michigan Agricultural College in 1896, but he only could stay 2 years. There was a depression in the late 1890s that caught the family, and he had to return home and help on the farm. But the only real consolation...
I thought they asked him to leave because he got in so much trouble.
Trouble?
That was the story I heard.
Could be. Maybe maybe my son Howard didn't feel he wanted to include that in his book. But at any rate, he came back to the farm and assembled from all of his resources 800 acres of land, and the corporation that was all this land was able to pay him the grand sum of $300 a year.
Now, you should know about this. It's history.
Well, that's my son Howard is now. That was pulled right from my son Howard.
I'm going to talk about another effect of many of you don't know about the terrible depression in the 1890s, and because LeGrand had been a state senator, he was living at the homestead, and he built a beautiful barn. If you look at the old pictures of the barn that's no longer there, it was just a gorgeous barn.
Yeah.
It was a huge barn.
Yeah.
Okay?
With cupolas
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes, LeGrand lived across the road from us.
It was obviously very expensive, and he got caught by the depression, and he lost the farm.
My three brothers, LeGrand, Charles, and George, at different times ran our store, our company store, our family store in Addison, Smith Brothers store. And at that time, money was really kind of a commodity in this area. We had lots of resources in terms of crops and other things, and bartering was kind of crude. So we decided to just start minting our own money in lieu of the fact the federal system hadn't gotten out here at that point.
So if I can continue.
I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, not at all.
Sorry, great-grandson.
Okay. Many of you know that Howard sold the homestead farm to a man named Martin and was out of the family and basically through the Depression years until my father bought it in '42. What many of you don't know that we learned this after my parents died, and they had done a title search when they bought the farm. They'd never really shared it to us. And we looked at the title search. It turns out LeGrand lost the farm in the late 90s, and it was bought by a woman in Adrian. We couldn't find any connections. H.R. Howard R. Smith was teaching at Wisconsin, and he bought the farm back on a land contract about 1910 or 1912, and he turned that land contract over to his younger brother George B. about 1916, 1917, something like that.
And there was a land discrepancy.
Right.
There was a title discrepancy,
Yeah.
and they were compensated with 6 acres of land,
Yeah.
which was down in the bottom. That remained in the the Millie Smith, Howard Smith family, until just a few years ago, it was transferred over to the Nick Smith family to be absorbed into their farm.
Okay. Well, that episode, okay, when the homestead farm out of the family twice, may explain, well, I don't know if it does or not. Forget this.
All right.
a little. Oh, I'm sorry. Go
There's a
ahead.
story about when my grandparents married. Elizabeth Rogers and Floyd Smith. Some of the Rogers were dubious. Elizabeth marrying a Smith because they were always in debt. Okay? And don't marry into that family, right? Yeah.
Actually, George, my oldest son, read law, went to Oberlin College, and then went to Chicago, read law. At that time, you didn't need to go to law school to become an attorney, and was admitted to the Illinois bar in 1900, and worked for a firm, Dunn and Cummins, I believe. And, well, we don't know how successful he was, but he chose to bring his family back to the homestead because apparently it was available. It was my understanding that he bought it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
That was George?
George
Burr. George B.
George Burr.
Oh, yeah. They were all risk takers.
And that's where he.
Especially those attorneys.
Yeah. And he was really what they called a gentleman farmer. He really wasn't all that excited about the idea of farming, getting his hands dirty, but he was pretty good at making deals. So that's kind of how it went, and up until he was taken suddenly, and his wife was left behind. Okay, that's my youngest son. I'm not going in age order. Let's go take a tour of here of my middle son.
You gotta go this way unless you want to let go.
Howard Smith.
I know, I think you want to let go.
Like I say, Howard R. lived to be 90 years old. And so he didn't get around to buying his cemetery plot until quite late in life. So he actually purchased his lot sometime after my great-grandson Roger Smith was taken at a very early age, at 4 years of age. Great-grandson Lance recalls his mother telling him that really caught people off guard out here, and they purchased these 3 rows, more or less, 20, 21, and 22. Not quite all of the 3 rows, but a good deal of them. So, I don't think you'll find anyone here buried before 1953 when Roger passed away. My middle son, Howard Remus, was well known for his efforts in securing quite a sum of money from the federal government to combat tuberculosis. He's credited with securing about $500,000, which of course is real money now, but it was really real money then.
Bovine.
Bovine, right, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, I meant to say bovine.
Yeah.
Bovine tuberculosis. Eradication. So, his wife, Hazel New, he married quite late in life, is buried here, and her brother, Paul Revere New, as well as his only 2 children, Hart, and of course, that service for Genevieve will be tomorrow. Well, that kind of concludes my immediate family, and I've really appreciated you coming out, and if you have any other questions.
Thanks for channeling.
Now you know who the diehards are.
That was excellent.